What is it really like to prep for months off as a solopreneur? In this episode, I'm sharing the reality of prepping for my maternity leave from what worked to what felt like a total flop.
Being an online business owner is full of ups and downs. Some days you can't imagine going back to your 9 to 5, and other days you want to burn your whole business to the ground. We get it.
Welcome to Chaos to Conversions, a podcast of practical, no BS strategies to grow your online business. Each week, we're chatting about launching, copywriting, mindset, and more, so you can make sense of the chaos and do more of what works.
Join the conversation and let's grow together.
Welcome back to Chaos to Conversions. At the time of this recording, I have 1 week left of my maternity leave, and I'm not going to lie, I'm feeling pretty nervous about going back into kind of quote unquote business full time, business as usual. I'm not nervous about working again necessarily, but just balancing this new stage of life. But I'm not here to necessarily focus on that, although that could totally be another episode in itself. Request that again in like a year after I've been doing this for a while. But I do want to come back onto the pod and talk about maternity leave because back in June, I believe, June or July, episode 73, I talked about my plan for maternity leave. And wow, I had a lot of hopes and dreams for how things would go. And in this episode, I want to share what actually happened. I want to share what totally worked and what totally did not, what I would do again, and what was a flop. So I also wanted to share a bit of my birth story because I always like listening to birth stories. And if you find that kind of stuff interesting, you can stay tuned for that. I will mention the birth story at the end of this episode, and I'll give you a heads up that that's coming. So if that's not your thing and you don't want to hear about that, you're not going to offend me if you tune out at that point. So anyways, like I said, I'll give you a heads up. But I want to start with just a quick recap of what my plan for maternity leave was. If you didn't listen to episode 73 or it's been a while, I definitely think it's still like worth going to listen to that one just to kind of get like a full scope of what my plan was. If you are someone who wants to go on maternity leave or take an extended period of time off in your business, I did have a lot of plans. And I think I could have done them a little bit differently to make some of them more successful. But anyways, I just think it's a good episode to listen to if you're just like trying to get a list of like things you might want to be thinking about for your time off. But in this episode, I wanted to come back and say like what actually worked because I did say in episode 73, hey, I'll let you know if any of this actually, was worth doing or if I actually followed through on any of it. So that's what I'm here to do today. So for the quick recap, I planned to take 3.5 months off from mid-August through the end of November. And during that time, I'm a solopreneur. So in my day-to-day business, I do work by myself. I don't have anyone else on my team. But for maternity leave, I planned to bring a VA on to support me during maternity leave and then also bring on another copywriter to help inside of my copy membership, the Copy Huddle, because I just didn't want to have to worry about that. But I didn't want to leave my members hanging. I wanted them, to have the support during that time. And another big part of my maternity leave was that I planned to have all of my content mapped out and written and scheduled ahead of time from May through December. And that included emails and podcasts. I didn't have a plan for Instagram content. And I talked about that in episode 73, where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do about Instagram because as of right now, I have no plan for that. So I'll let you know how that actually ended up going. And then I also had 2 to 3 launches planned during that time. There were going to be small email only launches, but it was like relaunching my Copy Huddle membership, relaunching some services. And I want to say there was like one more thing I'd maybe planned to do, but that was at least the main two. Maybe there's like a pop-up launch I think I had at one point for the Copy Huddle. So, and then as far as client work, because that is my main source of income, like 99% of my income comes through client work. And so I had planned to batch all of my clients' work ahead of time by like the end of July, I believe. Yeah, I was going to have all of their stuff ready to go. And then my VA was going to like basically deliver it to them monthly. So I had like a Google Doc with all this stuff ready, and then she would put it onto the doc for them and send it out. And I would have 2 pop-in days a month where I handle any edits, revisions, questions, scheduling, things like that for them. So that was the plan. And at the time of that episode, I was also still navigating some really big questions about how I was going to handle things like new inquiries coming in, or what work would look like with the baby, or how I wanted to adjust my offers and marketing post baby, or what tasks my VA would help with, and things like that. So I kind of want to follow up on some of those questions that I still had at that time too, and let you know again what actually happened. So here is the debrief. Let me actually pull up my docket right here that I had to help me with planning, and I'll kind of go through um kind of the turns that the things took. So in March through April, a lot of my plan, because I found out I was pregnant in December. And so I guess by like March, I would have been what, like at the end of my second trimester, beginning my second trimester, sorry, end of my first, moving into my second trimester. And so my plan at that time was to like finalize my maternity leave plan, decide how my membership was going to run, and start mapping out content. And at that time, I was also going to be informing clients that I was pregnant and I was going to be kind of taking time off and meeting with them about strategizing for that time off. So I feel like overall that went pretty well. Like March through April, I really did follow through on all of that. I did have like a really good plan in mind. I felt really confident about that plan. The meetings with clients went really well. That was all well and good. Where things started to take a turn for the quote unquote worst, worst, was that in at like 22 weeks. So I don't know exactly what month that would have been, but I like put a note here in my like May through June task list. Ditched when I got cholestasis. So I'll talk about this a bit more in the birth story towards the end, but something to know if you didn't know was that I actually ended up having a high risk pregnancy. I developed something called cholestasis or ICP, which is a liver disorder that develops in pregnancy, and it requires a lot of additional monitoring. I was having to go in weekly for non-stress tests and ultrasounds, and I wasn't sleeping super great because I was having like some symptoms from the cholestasis. And so and also a big piece of that was that I, obviously was planning to work up until around 37 weeks and then kind of have from 37 to 40 weeks more like relaxed. So that would have been like into the beginning of September. Well, then I was told because of the cholestasis, I was going to have to deliver at 37 weeks. And obviously, I didn't want to be working up until right at 37 weeks. So that shifted my timeline as well, because again, I was originally planning on taking 3.5 months off from mid August through November. And then I ended up taking all of August off through the end of November. So while it may not seem like a huge deal because that was only like 2 weeks, that was 2 weeks that I planned on doing a lot of prepping my content, prepping for clients, and all these different things. So that started feeling really stressful because I really didn't start any of that prep until my second trimester. That's probably the big thing I would do differently if and when I have another child in the future is prep way farther in advance than just the second trimester. Like I would probably start doing a lot of the content prep in the first trimester, which also sounds crazy because I felt like prepping for the whole year was insane at that time. But it really was nice to have emails like ready to go and all that kind of stuff. Really, I only got 1 month done, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. So, anyways, so yeah, I also had planned from May to June, I was going to do like a membership push to try to get some more people in my membership so that I had some additional income coming in through maternity leave. I was going to host a free event. I was going to try to book some additional clients, all these different things. And a big thing was that I was going to try to finish batching content by the end of June. And I put a note here that said, LOL, didn't finish this by June. I ended up having to do it all the way through July. Basically, like through July, I was like, you know what? It's just not going to happen. And I ended up having to stop batching content completely. And I want to say I only batched August and maybe like part of September. I don't even think I got all the way through September, maybe like an email or two. So I did have to write a lot of emails while I was on maternity leave. But I'll talk more about that in a second. It wasn't like a huge deal, but yeah, in hindsight, I would have liked to have started planning a bit earlier. Obviously, I didn't know that I was going to end up having the kind of pregnancy that I did. Yeah, so there were some other things on my list that just like didn't happen, right? Like I didn't end up posting that free event. I didn't end up doing another membership push. I didn't push to do a lot of one-on-one client work because like I said, a lot just got moved. And then I felt like really pressed for time. And my main focus was really making sure that my existing clients who were on a contract with me were well taken care of while I was away and that the members were going to be well taken care of while I was away. So I would say overall, the things that like were a total flop and did not go well was the batching of the content. The good thing is that I did have a plan for my content. So even though I was doing a lot of the writing for like September and on during my maternity leave, I had a plan for it. So it wasn't like I was having to come up with emails on the fly. I did end up adjusting some of those emails though, because during my maternity leave, I decided that I was going to learn some new strategies for my business and try launching an offer. And that did require me creating a bunch of new content like emails and Instagram content. And so I did have to revise the plan a bit. But I think that's something I didn't expect. Like I didn't know how maternity leave was going to go for me. I think it can go a lot of different ways depending on the kind of baby you have, the kind of support you have, and all that kind of stuff. The first month, I was definitely extremely hands off with my business. And then once I felt like I was starting to get the hang of things more, I really did feel like I wanted to do stuff in my business and I wanted to get ahead on like work for myself, things that I don't normally get to do during the year because I'm taking care of clients as my main priority. So I was like, it would be really nice to get like some back end things organized, to learn some new stuff. And then again, I did have the headspace to write emails and stuff like that. Now, was I doing them, squeezing them into nap times? And whenever I had the baby with my mom and whenever my husband was home or late at night, yeah, like I was getting scrappy with it, right? Like I was having to find time to do those things. It wasn't like all day I was just sitting around writing emails. So, anyways, I definitely was happy though that I had that kind of headspace and that kind of experience. A lot of people had kind of told me, hey, you might find that partly through your maternity leave, you actually feel the urge to be creative and do those things. I wasn't really sure if that was going to be true for me, and it turned out that it was. As far as things that went well, I felt like having a VA to support me during mat leave went really well. I did end up planning all of the tasks for them ahead of time. So I like for the most part, I would say like 80 to 90% of the tasks that I planned was all ahead of time. So during my mat leave, I said, okay, here are the things I'm going to want you to do each month. Here are the deadlines. And I also went through and added descriptions for like what they actually need to do. If I need to record like a Loom video showing them how to do it or record, or not record, but write like a directions for how to do it. That was really nice and helpful because again, I just didn't have to think about it. Everything was pre-planned for me and I didn't have to worry like, oh my gosh, did I tell her how to do XYZ thing? So definitely if you are planning on taking some sort of maternity leave or extended time off, that was super helpful for me. And same with having another copywriter come into my membership. That was really nice. I really appreciated not having to worry about the membership. I knew that they were taken care of and I really trusted her and I knew that they're in good hands and I definitely would do that again, bringing on support during this time. I think one thing I definitely would change going forward, I had like, like I mentioned, some launches planned to promote like my membership and to promote my services. And again, they were only email-based launches, but I think like in hindsight, it was like kind of a silly thing to do, but because I was only doing it on email and I wasn't like showing up in other places, like building some excitement about these email launches, like nothing really came of them. They didn't really go that well. And it was stressful writing like additional emails for the launches. I think if I just stuck with the weekly emails, that would have been fine. I really didn't need to have those going. And again, I didn't have a chance to pre-write those because the timelines got scooched up and that was stressful for me trying to write launch emails in between naps and all those kind of things. So I definitely would just scratch that next time during my maternity leave and just focus on nurturing and trying to get clients in other ways, right? Like maybe doing direct outreach or I don't know. I'd have to think about exactly how I wanted to like change that up, but basically I'd scratch the launches. Now, another thing I felt like went super well was batching of client work. I obviously put a lot of my energy there because obviously that is my business is working with clients. And so it was really important that I did that well. And I personally feel like it went really well. I didn't hear any complaints from clients and it seemed like it went well for them too. So I was really happy that that did work out. And like I said, I had the VA send out the batched content to them each month. And then I had the two pop-in days. The pop-in days were fine. Like it did give my clients a specific time to know when to expect me to come in and like do edits. For me, there were times when like I could have, maybe the pop-in day was like on a Tuesday and I'm like, I could technically be like editing stuff on like this Monday. Like I do have time between naps, but it also gave me a dedicated day where I'd like have to worry about it per se, right? So if on Monday things got derailed with naps or I wanted to like not have to work at all, I didn't have to worry about it. But I knew that next day on the Tuesday when I'd promised my clients, hey, I'm going to be there editing, I knew I had to have my game face on. Luckily, I didn't have to do a ton as far as editing and scheduling, and clients were always flexible if I needed to be flexible for some reason, like if I needed to do the work later in the day, like in the evening or something like that. They were all really understanding. So, but overall, I felt like that went really well. And that's something I would probably just repeat next time because was it maybe like a perfect system? No, but I feel like it was as close as it's going to get and that it worked out for both me and the clients. And yeah, definitely if you are a service provider and you're trying to figure out how to like keep clients on retainer during your maternity leave, definitely reach out if you want like more advice on how I did that. I'm happy to share because I know that was something I really struggled with when I was planning my maternity leave was how was I going to make like I wanted the experience to be good for my clients, obviously. So I'm happy to share what I did and you can kind of tweak it to fit your own personal business. Okay. And in true being on maternity leave fashion, I don't actually know where I left off when I left off saying, so I had to pause to grab baby. And now he's eating while I record the rest of this. So just again, a reality check that I've been doing a lot of things during this maternity leave, including recording some podcast between naps and between feedings or while feeding in this case. So, anyways, what I wanted to leave off with this is kind of if I was going to redo this, right? Or again, if I was planning for the next kiddo coming in my life. Obviously, the circumstances with me are a bit different because I did have a high risk pregnancy and I did have so many appointments towards the end. I was having to go sometimes like multiple times a week to the doctor. That was really rough. So, in an ideal world, I would have loved if I didn't have to work like at all during my third trimester and I could just focus on getting through the appointments. I wasn't sleeping well at that time. Obviously, as you get more pregnant, you're just uncomfortable. And so yeah, it would have been nice to like not have to just worry about work at all, but that was actually like one of my busiest seasons planning for maternity leave because I was also doing client work and stuff like that. I mean, obviously I made it work. Everything was fine. It worked out however it needed to, no big deal. But again, in an ideal world, it would have been great to like not work during the third trimester. And also in an ideal world, I would have loved to have hired help to allow me to prep for maternity leave. So maybe I could like hire someone to write emails for me or hire someone to, I don't know, take care of an Instagram post or something, right? Not just having like a VA help during maternity leave, but actually someone helping me prep beforehand as well. That would have been really great. But the circumstances at the time didn't allow for me to do that. And again, totally fine. I made it work. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? You'll figure it out. And like me, that meant dropping some of the things I'd planned and just saying, I'll figure it out. If I don't send emails for a month during my maternity leave, that just doesn't happen, or a month or two, all right, I will survive and so will my business, right? Like, we'll make it work. And guess what? I found the time to do it. Again, totally fine. So, anyways, I think overall, I was really happy with how things went. It was really the content piece that was probably the biggest flop for me. And like I said, I figured it out. So, and I was still able to, I don't think I actually skipped a week during my maternity leave with putting out emails. So maybe 1 week in there, but overall pretty solid. Giving myself a big high five. I definitely sent some emails late. I definitely sent some emails on the wrong day because I didn't send them on the original day, but did they go out? They sure as hell did. So giving myself a high five over here for that. And yeah. But like I said, if you are someone who's planning a maternity leave, I would love to hear about it. I would love to help you out. That was one of the biggest things in preparation for me going on maternity leave. I talked to a lot of business owners. I mean, a lot. I'm not talking one or two people. I probably talked to like 10 plus people about them planning for their own maternity leave, what that looks like for them. Obviously, every single business and circumstances are different, but it was so nice for me to just get insight, even if I didn't like replicate exactly what they did in their business, being able to know what things did look like for other people and having other people give me insight of like, you might find that you have energy halfway through your maternity leave and want to do some work. And so that was something that I was like, I don't know, but I kind of liked to just hearing that and knowing that that was an experience a lot of people had. So I wasn't like, I don't know, maybe judging myself halfway through when I was feeling that way. And I'm like, am I a bad mom? Like, no, a lot of people are feeling this way. And it was a nice creative outlet for me during a time where I was spending a lot of time at home. And I had like some extra brain space where I didn't want to like just sit and watch TV all the time. So being able to talk to people and get insight into what that looked like, especially as a first time mom, that was really nice. And so if again you're prepping your own maternity leave, please pop into my DMs at the Relevant Collective on Instagram. I'd love to chat with you, or we can Voxer. I did that with a lot of people, and that was really nice. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay, and this is the portion where I will now move into my birth story. So if that does not interest you and you do not want to hear that, again, not going to offend me, but that's what's happening next. All right, so let's talk birth story. So kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, during my pregnancy, I developed a condition called cholestasis. I may be saying that wrong, but that's how I'm going to say it. Otherwise called ICP, which stands for like, I don't know, something, something, cholestasis of pregnancy. And the original symptom that I had was really bad itching on my feet, which is really common with cholestasis. So around like 22 weeks, I went to the doctor and I told them that I'd had a lot of itching. And one of the reasons I even knew to bring it up, because when I Googled it, that was something that came up was cholestasis. And I was like, surely, like, that's not what it is. I was just thinking, I don't know, maybe my skin's really dry. Or like, when you're pregnant, your feet kind of swell and stuff. So I was like, maybe my skin's just like stretching a little bit. So I don't know. But I brought it up to her. We did some testing and I did come back with elevated bile acid levels, which is the signal that you have cholestasis. And so the nights definitely felt very long for much of my pregnancy because I was up a lot with very hot, swollen, itchy feet. I would literally put ice packs on my feet to go to bed. That was super fun. I also had to take medication 3 times a day to help control the bile acid levels and to keep them down because, yeah, you don't want them to get elevated because it's like in your blood system, which, like, the baby, it's like getting your blood and things like that. So, anyways, one of the things that makes cholestasis like a big concern is that it can lead to increased risk of having a stillborn. And so typically it's recommended that you do deliver early at 37 weeks. And so one of the things that's a little bit different for me compared to a lot of other people who have cholestasis is that a lot of people, obviously not all of them, but a lot of people don't discover they have this condition or this like, yeah, like pregnancy condition until they're like very late in their pregnancy, like 35, 36 weeks. And then they're typically kind of induced like right after. They're like, oh, yeah, you have cholestasis. Let's just go ahead and induce you. In my case, obviously, learning at 22 weeks was not unusual or uncommon, but a little less common. And so that was something that kind of concerned me with future pregnancies. I definitely am like worried that it would get worse because I think the percentage is like if you have cholestasis, you're like 60 or 70% more likely to develop it with your other pregnancies. And so I do worry that it would be worse in the future, which again is why I think it would be nice for me to maybe not work in the third trimester because by the third trimester, my feet were insanely itchy. I was pregnant during the summer, so I was really hot, which obviously didn't help either. And then I was like, super pregnant, so I wasn't sleeping great anyways, but the itching was keeping me up a lot at night. And so I wasn't sleeping great. And then obviously having the NSTs, the non-stress test, and the ultrasounds multiple times a week was a lot as well. Just having to like travel to the doctor a lot. And yeah, that was not fun. Luckily, all my NSTs, ultrasounds were fine. My bile acids never got horrible. So that was really good as well. But again, it was still recommended for me to deliver 37 weeks. So one thing that was kind of a shock for me at the time was I really did want to have as much of a natural birth as I could. I was giving birth at a hospital, but I was like, I want to like try to see how long I can go without an epidural. I don't want to be induced. Like, I don't want to do XYZ, like all these things, right? Which I think a lot of people want that as well. So learning that I would have to be induced was, yeah, it was a bit of like a small mourning period for me to be like, okay, I'm having to let go of something that I really want, but this is what is best for, me, for baby. And so that's what we're going to have to do. And I feel like I've heard so many like horror stories about inductions, and I'm sure that there are really bad induction stories out there, but this is definitely not one of them. So yeah, I'm not going to give you like a horror story. So if that makes you feel any better. I went in for the induction at 37 weeks and a couple of days, and they started me out with Cytotec and a Foley balloon, which was super uncomfortable. I like the Foley balloon might have actually been like one of the worst parts of it, just because like, it's like a tube like hanging down between your legs and all that. And it made it like really uncomfortable to sit and all those kinds of fun things. So what was good about the Cytotec and the Foley balloon though was it actually did start contractions. Like I wasn't having Pitocin or anything, but it did get me started on just having contractions. When I had arrived at the hospital, I was only a centimeter dilated. But then because I started having the contractions with the Foley balloon and everything, they actually said that they couldn't give me Pitocin because my contractions were regular enough that the Pitocin would like, could be kind of, I guess, harmful because it could make the current contractions like way too intense and all those kinds of things, which would not be good for the placenta and for the baby, could like stress the baby out. And so I had the Foley balloon for about 6 hours. And then at the 6 hour mark, they came back and I was 4 centimeters dilated. So they removed the balloon. And again, I was having regular contractions at that point. So we just kind of continued to see like what the contractions would do. At this point, I just continued to labor unmedicated. And the contractions were coming like pretty regularly. They weren't super intense. It was kind of more just like period crampy kind of feelings. And in between contractions, I was still feeling like pretty good. And I had like energy. We were like playing games and laughing and talking, like all was pretty chill. And then at the next check, they came in at like 7:30 p.m. I had gotten to the hospital like 7 in the morning, but they didn't actually get me started on everything until like 10:30. So around like 7:30 p.m., I was 5 centimeters dilated and I'd made pretty good progress. But that's when things start to get like a bit fuzzy for me because things start getting like a little bit more intense around this time. So they did break my water at this point, and I continued to go unmedicated for a little bit, but the contractions really started to pick up from there, and I started having severe back pain. And I don't know if that's like regular labor pain or if I was having back labor, but like it literally felt like someone was like splitting me in half from my back. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is like pretty intense. This is kind of going on for a couple hours, and I was getting really tired. I had not really slept very well the night before, maybe like a couple hours. And, I'm going on several hours now of labor. And so I'd kind of like mentally decided, okay, if I'm like 7 centimeters or more, but the next time they check me, I'll continue to labor unmedicated. But if they come back in and I'm not 7 centimeters, like I'm getting the epidural, which for me was like a bit of a surprise that I felt that way because I'd always been kind of terrified of getting an epidural. Just the idea of, something going into my spine did not really sound very appeasing, but I definitely was not feeling great. So around 8 p.m., the doctor came in and they checked and I was at 5 centimeters. So I hadn't really made like much progress between the last like two checks. And so I decided to go ahead and do the epidural. They had my family leave the room, which I know sometimes my mom and my husband were there with me and my sister-in-law. And so they had everyone leave, which was also like kind of scary because I was like, I don't want to do this like by myself. But the nurse stayed there and the anesthesiologist came in. Luckily, he made it like pretty easy. The worst part was just like getting onto the bed while having pretty intense contractions. And I was a little bit nervous that I wasn't going to be able to stay still, but everything was fine. They got it in place, immediately felt relief. And luckily, with I don't know, however he placed it or whatever the intensity of the medication they gave me, I don't know all the medicalness behind that, but I was able to still move around a good amount. I just felt like, very heavy in the legs and things like that. So that was really nice. And I think that made the epidural a lot more bearable for me because that's one other thing I was really nervous about with the epidurals. I didn't want to feel like I was like paralyzed from the waist down. I did want to be able to move. And so I was able to do that. I was able to kind of like switch some positions around and I was able to still feel like some pressure with the contractions and things like that. So after the epidural was placed, like I said, I got like immediate relief from that, which is amazing. But unfortunately, my contractions slowed down quite a bit after the epidural. And that's when they were able to kind of start the Pitocin around like 2 a.m. And so at that time, I was just trying to get some rest because I knew like I was going to have a little bit longer in labor and I wanted to get some sleep in. And so I tried to sleep, but it definitely wasn't like easy to get sleep in because my heart rate for whatever reason was like going up a lot. Like I was having a lot of elevated blood pressure, a lot of elevated heart rate. And there's like this monitor that would like be beeping every time my heart rate would like get high above a certain point. So literally every 2 minutes, my mom was going over to the monitor and like turning it off, turning it off. It was like not very fun. I was having to, change positions every 30 minutes. I had this like heart rate cuff, not heart rate, blood pressure cuff on me that was going off like every 30 minutes to check my blood pressure. So yeah, like it wasn't great sleep, but I was able to get a bit of shut eye between all those different things happening. And also during this time, while my heart rate was going up, we saw that the baby's heart rate was actually dipping a bit with contractions. And so that started making the team a little bit nervous. They weren't super concerned at that time because he was recovering quickly, but they definitely were just kind of wondering how the pushing part of labor was going to go. On top of my heart rate being kind of going up a lot and my blood pressure going up, I was also getting the shakes really badly. I don't know if it was like adrenaline, the epidural, who knows, but they were intense enough that like my teeth were literally like chattering. And so I was trying to do a lot of different things to like relax because clearly my body was just like in a weird state. Yeah, I don't know if it was like the adrenaline or just anticipating like what was coming next, like, oh God, I'm gonna push and then I have like a baby in my arms. But yeah, there's kind of a lot going on at that time. So in the middle of the night, it was a lot of me and my mom like just trying to get me in a more calm state because I definitely was feeling the anxiety creeping up a lot. Yeah, so at about 3 a.m., they came in and they checked me again, and luckily I'd made progress. I was 7 centimeters dilated, about 90% effaced, and -1 station. So he was like starting to move down, which is great. And I believe at this point is when they actually decided to go ahead and put like an internal monitor on him because they were having a lot of, with his heart rate dipping and then me having to move a lot in the bed with the epidural just to like, you know, I guess they do that to keep you from getting like too sore or whatever. I'm not sure. Like keep the medication from settling on one side. I don't know. Is that how it works? But anyways, because they were having me flip around so much, it was just causing like the external monitors to move a lot, and they felt like they weren't really getting a good read on him. So they put that in, which I wasn't like a super big fan of, but I understood the reasons for it. And then at 6 a.m., they came in to check again, and I was 9 centimeters dilated, 100% effaced, and 0 station. So yeah, he was like pretty engaged in the pelvis at that point and was, getting close to making his debut. So they didn't want me to actually begin pushing around that time. I mean, I know I wasn't like a full like a 10 centimeters dilated, but I also kind of had like a bit of a cervical lip that was kind of in the way. And so they wanted to make sure that had kind of hopefully moved to the side a bit, or someone was going to have to move it to the side, which I think is actually ended up what they ended up doing when it was time to push. So yeah, that was at about 6 a.m. And then at 7 a.m. they came back, and that's when I was fully dilated and all those other things. And it was time to start pushing. So because I had the epidural, I was pushing on my back, and I did try like a different position, but I could not feel my legs enough to really get like in an all fours types of position. And so we went just with the old on your back, which was fine. And again, I was still able to feel like my legs a bit, and I was able to feel the pressure while pushing, which was nice. So I could kind of tell when the contractions were starting to come on, and they were just like literally telling me, "Hey, whenever you feel a contraction coming, like and you start feeling the pressure, let us know, and then we'll kind of coach you through some pushing." And weirdly, this was probably not probably it was my like favorite part of labor. I don't know why. I think just again, I know we're getting close to seeing him, and that was really exciting. And I think just like the energy in the room at the time during pushing was just it was like really fun. I really liked I was giving birth at a teaching hospital, so I had I'm like forgetting what you call them, but like the doctors that are still going through like their rotations in medical school. The guy that was in there, I'd actually saw him when I first checked in. He was like the first doctor I had. And I really liked him. And then his shift started like right around the time that I was pushing. And so he was in there for that. And he was really nice and really funny. And then my doctor actually showed up, even though she wasn't on a call, which I really appreciated. And she made it really just nice and breezy. And everyone was literally like laughing and joking. I feel like half the time I was pushing, but it just made it feel really fun and really lighthearted. I wasn't nervous during that point. At that point, I was just really excited. And so, yeah, he was born a little after like 9 o'clock. So I pushed for about 2 hours. And unfortunately, right after he was born, things were like a little chaotic. He came out with a cord wrapped around his neck, and he wasn't breathing right away. And so they did have to like call a code red and have a bunch of nurses come in, and luckily, they were able to just give him some oxygen, and he was okay, before he even left the room. But it was sad to not be able to have that kind of traditional, like, golden hour of him, like, being on my chest right afterwards and all those kinds of things. I didn't really get that because they did want to take him to the NICU for monitoring for a while. And so, yeah, that was really nerve-wracking at the time. I don't think it really hit me like everything that was going on because, I was also being like stitched up and taken care of and all those kinds of things. And there's like a million people in the room and they're like taking him off somewhere. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I really didn't even know what was happening. They just said like they needed to take him to the NICU. And so I was like, okay, I'm like not really sure like how concerned I should be right now. I feel like in a weird state of shock. And yeah, they kept him for about like 6 or 7 hours. And then we were able to get him back before the end of the night and have our first night with him. And yeah, so I didn't really know why he was really in there until afterwards, whenever I was able to bring him back into the room. And they're like, yeah, it was really just for monitoring. We just really wanted to be sure because he was having some like squeaking whenever he was breathing. And so they wanted to make sure that he was all good to go. But luckily, he is fine. All was well. And I'm just really thankful that I had a really good team of doctors who were obviously invested in making sure he was okay and taking care of him. So, yeah, that is essentially my birth story. And because, again, of the cholestasis and being high risk, it's very, very likely I would develop it in future pregnancies. Very, very likely I'd have to have an induction again. Obviously, if I had the cholestasis, I would have to. And to be honest, I feel like now that I've had an induction and had the experience that I had, I feel a lot less nervous having to walk into that in the future. The most nervous I'd be about in pregnancies in the future is just not knowing how the cholestasis was going to go. I wouldn't want it to get worse. And unfortunately, it definitely could have been worse than I had it. So that would really be the bigger concern at that point. But overall, I feel like I had a really positive birth experience, even though I was someone who very much did not want to have an induction, did not want to have an epidural. I am very satisfied with how everything went and honestly loved the epidural. I'm glad that I did a mix of both. About half of my labor, I was unmedicated. It was nice to just experience that and let my body do its thing. And then it was also really nice to be able to relax a little bit for the second half of the labor and also not feel the intense pain of pushing. That was also great as well. So, no regrets. I'm really happy with how everything went. And I'm really glad I had the team of people that I had taking care of me. So that's my birth story. That's my maternity leave story. Like I said, I'm a week out at the time I'm recording this, but by the time that you're listening, I've basically been back to work for about a month. So I'll have to give you some updates later about how everything is going. But yeah, I hope that that helps someone out there, or at least satisfies your curiosity if you were just wondering how it went. And I'll catch you next time on Chaos to Conversions. Thanks so much for joining the conversation today. If you want to learn more about how we can work together on email marketing, launch copy, or content planning, head to therelevantcollective.com. I'll meet you back here next Tuesday for more practical strategies to take your business from chaos to conversions.